Physical therapy is facing the perfect storm. A workforce stretched thin by a shortage of more than 12,000 physical therapists and a demand curve that's booming faster than most practices can keep up with. Add that to a wave of AI tools that are moving into the clinical workflows, and the profession is navigating more change faster than any point in its history. Today, Justin Moore, CEO of the American Physical Therapy Association, or the APTA, joins us to answer the big question. What does it take for a PT to thrive, not just survive in this new era? Welcome back to HumanifAI HealthTech, where we explore how AI is rewriting the rules of healthcare and putting people right back at the center where they belong. I'm your host, Francesca Vereb, Head of Marketing at NetHealth. And today we're talking with Justin Moore, CEO of American Physical Therapy Association, the APTA, which represents over 1 million rehab therapy professionals. Justin has spent decades working at the intersection of policy, practice, and healthcare transformation as a licensed physical therapist, a former Capitol Hill lobbyist, and one of the clearest voices on what AI means for the rehab therapy space today. Justin is joining us ahead of the session at NetHealth Next 2026, where he will be talking about the forces reshaping rehabilitation therapy and what physical therapists need to do to stay ahead of them. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Me too. I have a lot of really great questions teed up for you. But let's start with one that's just going to sort of set the stage. So, as we mentioned, physical therapy is dealing with a lot all at once. And your workforce research shows that a national shortage of more than 12,000 full-time employed physical therapists is currently in play. And the demand is continuing to climb. Now, nearly half of the PTs that were surveyed in your report shared that burnout is a major problem for them. And at the same time, we've got all this new novelty of AI moving into the space, and documentation and care delivery is struggling more than ever before. How are practices able to absorb this? Well, when you look at all of that together, how do you describe the state of the profession right now?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. I think we're at a unique point in our history. I think we have uncharacteristic pressures on our workforce, as you articulated, increasing demand. And so we have to embrace new ways to practice. And the embracement of those new ways to practice will include becoming more technology enabled, really putting the patient back at the center of the equation, and really sort of getting into our communities, whatever those communities might be. And so I think that at this historic moment in our history that we're going to have to embrace change, and not just survive it, as you talk, and really sort of lean into these pressure points and address the workforce challenges by becoming more efficient, using technologies, leveraging team-based care, and really, lean in.
I love the fact that you put technology as one of the first things. So let's talk a little bit about AI as sort of a workforce multiplier. In discussions, talks, and things that I have seen you participate in, you've been really direct about the story that the profession needs to tell. You speak about AI as helping to expand access to care, helping to extend clinical reach, as you just mentioned, and also keeping that therapist focused on the patient, right? You mentioned the human side, which I think is so key. But that's a very different framing from one that a lot of clinicians are hearing, which is that AI is coming to automate their job. So how do you help a physical therapist understand what AI in physical therapy actually can do for them and what it can't?
Yeah, we our first and primary responsibility as AI has come into the profession is really to educate our members and to educate those around the profession on what it is and what it is not. And so that is really critical. And we believe that physical therapy will not be replaced by AI, but will be enabled or empowered and really leveraged for its best kept secret. And that is our human connection, our therapeutic alliance, our relationship with patients. But we also know in physical therapy that physical therapy is very dependent on time. Our codes are time-based. So if AI can put more time back into our patient engagements, back into our practices, we think that's going to be a force multiplier, as you said on the question. So I believe that AI can become a core component, a core tool in our practices and really help us be better at what we do. And I really think AI is going to do a couple key things. First, it's going to automate and accelerate administrative tasks. And we know that the administrative burden, and APTA has studied this as well, is significant on PT practices. Over 85% of our practitioners say that it limits their patient engagement, their patient care, and over 75 or about 75% of our practitioners have indicated they've had to hire administrative personnel. And so that's not contributing to patient care. It's really just helping them manage their practices. So if we can automate and accelerate our practices through AI, that's going to be positive as well. We also think that AI can take the vast amounts of information that all of us have at our disposal now and turn it into clinical insights. So can AI help us gather information around practice patterns, around evidence, and really put that into clinical insights, not taking away the expertise of the physical therapist, but really empowering that expertise. And then last, I actually think AI is going to help drive consumer demand. We do not have a demand problem in physical therapy, but I think we still are under-leveraged, undervalued, and underappreciated. So if AI becomes a tool for consumers to learn about the full scope of physical therapy practice, we think that's going to be positive and continue to drive demand to our clinicians and to our clinics. So.
I think it's a fantastic point. I love the fact that you spoke about automation. And for instance, specifically in September, I think it was 2025, the APTA actually published its first practice advisory. And that was really specifically focused on AI-enabled ambient scribe technology, right, for physical therapy. And to me, that just feels like a really clear signal that adoption has reached a point where the profession actually is starting to need some formal guidance from the association. But as you pointed out, documentation is a little bit of a mixed bag, right? So some feel like, hey, that's going to give me a lot of relief. Others are a little bit more jaded about it and say, now I've got more work to actually clean up the output. So from your perspective, what are the conditions that determine whether something like, ambient documentation actually works for the physical therapist versus adding to the burden?
Yeah, I think you describe the real dilemma that physical therapists are in. These technologies are coming onto the field so fast at this point that it really takes a lot of discernment and a lot of evaluation and assessment by the clinician. And so as you're going to use these tools, you should do it like you do any clinical intervention or any practice management software. You should start small, pilot, embrace the learning opportunity, and then really refine its quality controls. And so we think that, it can add value, but it's got to be done in a very systematic approach so that you don't reduce quality or add artifact into the system. And so I think we're advising clinicians to really look at these tools and look at their potential, but also to proceed with caution. And how do you really evaluate them in an appropriate way, make sure they fit your practice, and make sure they add value, not just additional administrative burdens.
Yeah, sounds like an excellent opportunity there to continue to guide the workforce. You also mentioned you didn't have a demand problem, and you spoke a little bit about how AI is helping with the future of, physical therapy. So switching gears a little bit to talk about that future state, let's talk about remote therapeutic monitoring and hybrid care models. Now, we understand that remote therapeutic monitoring, or RTM, is one of the most significant structural changes that are happening in PT right now. And in 2026, when the CMS final rule actually came out and expanded into RTM reimbursement with all these new codes that actually lowered the data threshold, and candidly, you actually mentioned this as well. You said time requirement, right? Like making it much more practical for a wider range of patients and practice types to adopt this. But the challenge is that there's still a lot of practices that are trying to figure out where do they start. So along those lines, for a practice that hasn't implemented RTM yet, what is the most practical first step, and where does AI actually fit into helping RTM work at scale?
Yeah, well, I want to start just by, I do think RTM and telehealth, there were two policy changes that really happened over the last 5 years that are driving this technology wave in physical therapy. The first was the emergency declaration that really accelerated the use of telehealth. And we're still fighting for that in Congress to make sure PTs can use telehealth technologies to maintain contact, patient engagement, and facilitate their treatment plans. And RTM was the second one. It was really a new code set that really drove to something we all know as clinicians must be adhered. We're partners with patients in physical therapy, so technology to help create that connection with our patients, whether it's monitoring, adherence, or compliance, are all positive. So I think we're on the front wave of this technology wave, or front end of this technology wave in PT, and I think practitioners do need to embrace it. So your question is, what do practices do to really embrace or to get, I would suggest that they start with just the learning process. And so attend conferences, sessions where they hear from clinicians on how they're utilizing RTM and how they're putting it into practice. I think there's a great learning curve that needs to take as you adopt technologies into your practices, and exposing yourself to those learning opportunities is probably the first step. Then I think the second step is to find the right partner. I think it's really important that you investigate what's in the field, choose a partner that's going to align to your practice, to your patient population, and then really partner with them on how you can bring this into your practice in a normal process. So starting small with maybe some pilots, scaling it up, and really doing that in a really methodical fashion. And I think that those are the two keys. So education, and then create a partner with a technology vendor that's going to help you navigate your unique community, your unique patient population to have an impact on this.
And just double clicking on that a little further, how do you see AI impacting the future of RTM, particularly in areas like outcomes tracking or movement analysis and scaling hybrid care in a way that's both effective for patients, but also, as you keep reminding us, sustainable for practices for future adoption?
Yeah, I think RTM and other technologies that are in the field are really giving us more collection of data and information on our patients and the treatments that we're applying and partnering with them on. So that when we have more data coming in, more of that input, I think ATI gives us the ability to filter, analyze, and use that data to really sort of move toward kind of a precision healthcare model where we can adapt and use our human brains and our clinical expertise to use that influx of information in more creative ways and in more personalized ways to serve our patients. So I think AI is going to be a huge asset to us as we continue to see more and more information coming into our practice as clinicians. And whether that's through RTI, whether that's through EHRs, whatever the mechanism in that data collection, I think it is really going to give us so much information that we're going to need tools at the end of the day like AI to help us gain these insights from that information.
I love that perspective there about, using the human brain combined with the technology. That's that multiplier effect, which I think is so key and so important here. Okay, switching gears a little bit, let's talk a little bit about the generational divide. So something I run into a lot, and you and I were chatting a little bit about, our families, and I'm a mother of older teens and a young adult. And I'm also responsible for being the support system for some aging parents. And clearly the generational divide occurs in all of those scenarios. We all handle technology differently, from my older parents that want to call absolutely everybody to my children who prefer to do everything, including speaking with me through a text. And now we're finding with AI that this is definitely exacerbated. And you've specifically called out that with AI, this whole transition is looking really different when you think about therapists and their careers. You've spoken about new graduates bringing on technology and just being so fluent with it versus an experienced clinician who might be a subject matter expert, but has maybe is a little bit more reticent about the AI tools and the precision that they may bring. Now, we understand that can create quite a big gap in a practice. So what guidance can you provide for how practice leaders should think about closing that gap? And how can the APTA help with building AI literacy across the full clinician population?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as we were talking earlier, we're both dealing with this in our personal lives. I have a 19-year-old college freshman who's now having to access healthcare halfway across or all the way across the country. He's in school in Seattle. We're here in Washington, D.C. And so the use of technology is natural for him. He looks at technology as part of his healthcare equation and is really comfortable with it. Then I have a 92-year-old father in rural Iowa who doesn't have any technology. And so doesn't even have internet access into his home. And so that creates different barriers and different generation gaps on how technology will be used by our patients, but also how we're going to be used in our clinics. And I think to close that gap all starts with education again and building the general literacy around technology. What we've found is younger clinicians almost are seeking clinics that are on the front end of technology because that's how they live, that's how they practice. And so for young clinicians, adopting technology in your clinic is a relevance question for them. And is your clinic relevant? Is your clinic really adopting best practices around how do you engage patients? How do you facilitate care? Where I think it's becoming a necessity in other generations. And so how do we have high burnout. You talked about it at the beginning. We have practice owners who are squeezed. They've been, going through a really rough time over the last 3 or 4 years, and they've gotten very efficient. But as they've gotten efficient and had to make changes in their practice, it's resulted in a lot of burnout, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And so they're coming to the table looking for solutions. And so their necessity to find new ways to practice, new ways to be efficient is really driving some adoption toward technology as well. So regardless of the drivers that are bringing people to the table, and those drivers are different in each generation, at the end of those drivers is technology solutions. And so regardless of the driver, we think they're going to end up at the same destination. And how do they create a unique digital ecosystem around their clinic, around their patients, and around their community so that they can be at the top of their license and really practice fully and best serve their communities and patients?
Absolutely. And so is the APTA doing a number of education programs as well to help support and augment the practices?
It's really where the value of professional associations comes out. We start when new technologies come into the field. We start with what you've experienced. We started with basic education, putting out practice advisories. Those are not how to do it, but just putting information into the field. So we start with a lot of education, a lot of just to raise the bar of awareness and exposure to these technologies. Then we sort of move into what is our core strength, and that is setting standards for the profession. Most people, that's what APTA has done well over its history, whether it's accreditation, whether it's specialty certification, whether it's additional standards that have guided practice over our history. We are good at the standard setting body, but we don't start with that. We start with information, exposure, awareness, and then we move into standard setting. And we're doing that right now. We're collaborating with our colleagues in the UK to really understand what practice guidance could look like or what standards could look like around the adoption of AI in clinical practices. And that's a very complex world, as you well know, dealing with patient privacy, dealing with the transmission of data. There's a lot of legal and regulatory ramifications in this AI space or in this technology space that we need to be able to both advocate and push standards around the best use of this, but also protect our practices and protect our patients. And so that standard setting body, we have an AI task force that's meeting this year. The hope is by the end of the year that we will issue the first guidance or guidelines in the US around the use of AI in physical therapy practice, and really sort of learning from our international colleagues, specifically in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, who are collaborating with us as they develop these guidelines. And the UK is actually on their second version of them right now. And we had the professional advisor from the Chartered Society of Physiotherapists at our conference meeting with our board and our component leaders, really to describe the process of what it takes to set good standards in this space.
So Justin, we'll grab those links from you as well and drop them in our, comment section as well and get that out to all of our listeners. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's key. Oops, sorry. Yeah. I think that's key. I think we need feedback from our clinicians. We need to know how they're using it, where they're finding challenges, where they're finding opportunities, because that information will help us guide those standards and help us make them more relevant to today's clinician.
Yeah, it's such an important role that the APTA plays for sure. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit more controversial with you on this next question. It's actually quite difficult to ignore this particular point. So CMS launched the access model for chronic musculoskeletal conditions. And that's the exact kind of care that PTs provide. But they structured it largely to exclude PT clinics. And the same pattern actually occurred with the ambulatory specialty model for lower back pain. Now, PTs, one would think, have all the evidence, they have all the models to target the problems, yet the profession keeps finding itself on the outside looking in. So what's actually driving that, and what does the APTA do about things like that?
Yeah, I think it's a complex question, as you know. We constantly advocate for the appropriate role of physical therapists. I think in a lot of these models, one of the nuances of them that we really see is generally there's a high recognition of physical therapy as part of the solution, but an under recognition of our ability to lead or to have a higher impact than they position us as. So a lot of times it's not necessarily us being left out of the models, it's being misplaced in the model. And I think that's a nuanced question and when we were, studying the access model before it was released, talking to CMS officials, there was high recognition of the value PTs provide. But then when the model came out, it kind of had us on the back burner. And so that's what we use advocacy for, to really try to move and replace physical therapy in these models, not necessarily, that we're left out and have to fight and get in the door, but we have to get to the right position inside the models. And there's a lot of advocacy work going on right now to at least let physical therapists have a higher role than they were initially determined. And that's all through advocacy, experts who can go to CMS and explain why physical therapists need to be in that role. And that is a surround sound type activity. So APTA is one voice. It tends to be a pretty big voice representing the profession, but we also know there's experts providing insight and counsel as well that help that surround sound that we better position physical therapy. And I always lived by the sort of philosophy in policy that, there's three stages. You have to be recognized. I think PT does that well. Then you have to be represented. And are you at the right role in the right position in the model? I think we have bigger challenges there. And then are we, rewarded? And are we for our role and or for our payment? And we tend to have a lot of battles to get that last R. And so we can get recognized. Sometimes we can get represented, but making sure we're rewarded for the value we provide has always been the third sort of tier of that advocacy effort and that policy initiative to really realize the full value of physical therapy in these models. The last thing I'll say is, and as you know, and a lot of people who are involved in this is, there's such a historic bias toward physician-driven care. And I think we're just on, you started the podcast around we're at this moment. And I think one of the biggest moments going on in healthcare is we're moving from physician or provider-centric models to consumer-based or consumer-centric models. And I think that's going to be an advantage for physical therapy when we have consumers demanding that we're part of these models, that we're not only part of these models, that we're their partner. I think that's going to help us even more than our loud voice on advocacy.
Totally. And in fact, you teed up my next question perfectly, because essentially one of the things I do want to talk about is this shift, right? This shift from a fee for service to more of this value-based sort of payment model, because essentially, as we start to think about how we reward physical therapists and what they do well, which is work around improving function, as you mentioned, preventing hospitalizations, reducing all the need for higher cost interventions, right? These are valuable services and interventions that this whole profession provides. But in practice, we're seeing a lot of these physical therapist clinics really still living in this volume-based world. And the tools and the workflows that we have are not quite making it to this value-based sort of standard just yet. So, Justin, when you think about that and you think about that last R, the third R in your model there, what has to actually change inside the practices, inside the payment systems, inside technology for physical therapists to actually get credit for the outcomes that they deliver?
Yeah, I think the answer is the model has to change. Fee for service is not going to reward physical therapy for the value it provides. And fee for service served the profession well as we grew. It, spawned a great outpatient physical therapy environment. It showed great value for practices, but it does not return value to the profession. And so I think we have to move out of a fee-for-service model where we're really defined by the parts, not the whole of our care. And so when you have a system of payment that's dividing us into 15-minute timed interventions, and those parts become how we're defined, I think that's going to limit our potential in how we serve patients and how we provide value to the system. And in value-based purchasing and value-based care models, they look at our payment model, and it's really hard to sort of interact with our complexity and our dependency on that model. And so I think the faster we move to a different payment model, which will provide value to the profession and demonstrate the value of what physical therapy provides the system, we're going to be well served. And I think the challenge is the fee schedule is known. It's an effort to show what practices are currently doing at a really fine level and detailed level. But so it does have value to those individual practices, but I'm not sure it has an overall value to the profession or to the profession's value to the system, which is obviously what these value-based payment models are driving to, is how can you invest $1 in physical therapy that's going to save $3-4 downstream and do that. And when, we're still counting minutes and, delivering 3 different interventions and calling that a visit, I think that's going to be our biggest Achilles heel to really showing value in the system.
Agreed. And I love the fact that you also talk about complexity. So flipping the script a little bit, let's think about the industry from the inside, right? A lot of what we've spoken about today, a lot of the bigger models are really being built around large healthcare systems, well-resourced, big practices. But we also know from your demographics, from just, even from the patients that we work with, the providers that we work with, that a significant portion of the care in this country is really delivered by these smaller independent practices. And the challenge with that, as you touched on earlier, they don't have dedicated IT staff. They have very thin margins. They're just struggling to be able to implement new tools completely on their own. So what does responsible AI look like, this adoption for them in smaller practices? And what do partners like ourselves or other partner platforms need to think differently in order to serve that segment, to deliver on some of the promises that you've laid out?
Yeah, I think, small practices are always going to have a large burden to be able to adopt technology. As you stated, their margins are small. A lot of them are operating on really low workforce. And so they don't have dedicated administrative personnel to really support them. So it really gets around these technologies have to be first affordable for them. They have to be accessible and available. And so if they can do that, I think that really accelerates adoption. The second thing is they can't add cost, complexity, or chaos because they've seen that. And, we talked about this. Technology has not always served the profession well. And so whether that was the large equipment of the 1980s or the start of EHRs in the 90s, what we hear from clinicians is that just added cost and complexity. So as these practices, and we're still, 75% small businesses in physical therapy, as these small businesses need to get more efficient, they're going to look for tools that are going to help them get that efficiency. They have a low burden of entry, and so that they can become accessible. They can teach their patients how to use them, and so I think it's really focusing around those things that'll help lower that. And the good news is, we were just at CSM in Anaheim, and I've not seen energy and excitement around the profession in the last 10 years like I did in Anaheim. And a lot of that was driven on the exhibit hall floor. And so not necessarily in the conference rooms. And what was happening is the clinicians were interacting with these solutions at a level that I've never seen. And that led to their excitement that they might have solutions coming to bear in their clinics that are going to help them get out of this rut. And they've had this rut since the COVID, setback of 2020, and they've survived the last 5 years. But now they're moving into, okay, we've survived. How do we now move into thrive? And technology is going to be part of that equation, whether it's ambient AI, whether it's an RTM technology. And I think each clinic is coming to the table with a little different priority and focus. And they might start with RTM, or they might start with documentation and scribing. But whatever it does, it really sort of starts that entry point and that learning curve to making your practice technology enabled, technology empowered.
Right. I also think one of the key components there is trust, right? Like we spoke a little bit earlier about what the APTA did with your practice advisory board that you set up for ambient AI. And we believe that's a really important move because it really gave clinicians a credible framework for thinking about how to, structure or implement these tools. But what we've also noticed is therapists have watched EHR implementations and they've seen those create far more work than they promised to solve. And so they are a little bit skeptical. They've got a little bit of that recency sort of memory related to that. And they were told EHRs were going to be time savers. And to be honest, a lot of them are telling us that they've turned out to be time sinks. So when you think about something like that and you think about building genuine trust now with this new sort of wave of AI tools that are being built into the PT space, how important is it for us to actually use those to win the trust of the clinician?
I think it's essential. I think you describe it really well. I think technology has not always been kind to physical therapy, and I think PTs are smart people. They recognize that they have been, at times so overpromised and underdelivered, and we have seen that where, I always joke is, we were all told that email was going to make our life simpler. I don't think that happened. So it's not necessarily the EHR, the technology that is the victim, but it has not necessarily added value from a standpoint of lower costs and more freedom to practice. And that's really what we're going to drive at is how do we build more freedom to practice? So I do think the skepticism is well earned and deserved, but I also think the solution to that is authenticity and stewardship. And if technology can help our clinicians really solve the problems they have and really help them gain time back and practice freedom, I think that trust will be restored. But it's going to take time to really build that credibility, build that ability that we're not trying to solve everything at once, but we're trying to provide meaningful solutions to significant problems that'll help us practice at a higher level.
Yeah, you said earlier as well, this notion of trust. You said about making it more human, right? You spoke about being able to practice at the top of your license. And we all know most physical therapists, they went in not for the documentation, they went in for that patient relationship, right? The hands-on work, the moment that's so fulfilling where they see someone who can now walk again, who thought that they might not be able to walk. So in a practice where AI is working really well, what gets more human and what does a physical therapist get back in their day?
Time. Time is the currency of the practice. And I think as technologies give more time back to clinicians, we become better versions of ourselves. And so our secret sauce in physical therapy is that relationship we build with patients, that coaching we do. So the technology might help us be a better coach. It's not going to replace that we're that coach, that partner, that caregiver to the patient. And regardless of technology, we're all human at our very nature, and we want that relationship and we want that connection. And if technology can strengthen that, it's going to be a game changer. It's not going to replace it, but if it can really empower that human connection and allow PTs to really partner with their patients through access to more data, through connection when you're not physically present, that's going to be a game changer for clinicians and really going to help us be our best self. It also, I think, so time is the first thing. I think the second T is task. I think there's things in PT practice we need to get rid of. And those are tasks that don't take us to our highest and best level. And so if there are tasks that can be done through technologies that don't need the expertise of the physical therapist and the on-site coaching, then we should move those into that category and allow PTs to be more known for their brains and more known for their clinical decision-making and discernment and less about the purveyors of interventions. And so I think that's going to be really quick transition that we need to make, that it's not going to be about how we do the intervention, but why we do it, how it's going to have value to that patient, and really leveraging technology to strengthen that connection in that relationship.
I love that. I think the point you make there is really that every, physical therapist is an active member in this adoption. They need to evaluate the workflow, innovate there. If there are things that don't make sense, like you say, set them aside and let's look at improving the industry together. Okay, last question. So throughout this discussion, you've really framed this particular time in industry as a moment of just unparalleled changes and compounded changes, right? There are changes on policy, there's changes with technology, you've got consumer behavior, you've got workforce changes, demand, all of this, all moving at the same time. Now, some of these are very visible and some of them are not. What is the biggest change that is coming for physical therapy that the profession isn't paying enough attention to yet? If you could see around a corner, what would you highlight?
I think it's community, convenient-based care. I think patients want care in their community, accessible. And I think, we've always been a pull people to our clinics. And I think people want care where they can get it, whether it's at their workplace, whether it's at their community center. And so I think that's the biggest trend. And you've seen that a little bit, and it was not necessarily successful, but you saw that with the retail pharmacies. And so the CVS's and Walmart's where they tried to do minute clinics and have retail clinics in those convenient care or retail health locations. I don't think we should take those models as a success or failure, but I think there was clear indications that patients of tomorrow are not necessarily the patients of yesterday, and they're going to want care when they have time to get it and where they want to receive it. And I think that's a really important trend. And I think we're just starting to see that in physical therapy. I think we're seeing that through the primary care movement and putting PTs in the ER, PTs in urgent care center. And I think that is really key, is that we're going to become what we've always been, is community-based providers. And that is going to be important for the future of our profession. I think the second thing that we're not thinking about is actually the deeper dive on workforce. I think we talk a lot about workforce adequacy, but I think we're also seeing the first signs of workforce activism or advocacy. And I think the workforce of tomorrow is really looking for supportive environments so that they can build a career and not just to be, for lack of a better word, a cog in the wheel. And so they're becoming more empowered to find a workplace that is really going to suit their career objectives and their demands. And I think that's going to require us to change how we treat our employees as physical therapist practices, as the industry. And because I think our workforce, we have a really strong pipeline into the profession. We're still recruiting very smart students to the profession. But if we're just churning them out, that's not healthy. And so we have to be in the workforce sustainability issue and actually create workplaces of tomorrow as much as just approach it from a workforce. So those are kind of the first two things that I think are really important, is really being the practitioner that's available and accessible to all the people in the community, and then really taking our best asset, which is our people, and really building support around them as professionals and the caregivers of tomorrow. And if there's one last thing I would say is I think we're seeing a little bit of back to future in physical therapy. I think it was probably not positive that we really didn't embrace team-based care. And so I think team-based care is going to be part of our future, whether that's better utilization of the physical therapist assistant or whether that's partnering with dietitians, mental health professionals. It's really building an ecosystem around our practices so they can do that first point and get the care they need when they need it. And, they don't want to go to the physical therapist and then go across town to the dietitian. They want to get those in the same place. They want to have integration of care, and the PT clinic can become a hub for them in their health journey.
What an exciting time. In fact, if I could redo my career step, I probably would, sign up and become a physical therapist. So thank you. Thank you so much, Justin. You have given us so much to think about. Really just incredible points. Thank you again for joining us on our podcast. We're going to let you go before we jump into our recap, but I am so excited to have you join us back at our Net Health Next conference in April. I'm really excited to see what that conversation is about and how it raises the stakes for PTs who will be in the audience. So thanks again, Justin. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Wow, what a great episode. Can't believe it's time for our recap already. So Justin has left us with such great thoughts to kind of mull over. I actually struggled to write these 3 takeaways because where do I begin? But essentially, here we go. First, With more than 12,000 physical therapists short of projected demand and nearly half of the profession already reporting burnout, the pressure is on every practicing PT, and it's real. AI, used well, is one of the only tools out there that's available to extend the clinic's reach without burning out the people that are already so stretched thin. Second, the gap between the PT clinic's value and the payment system and what it actually rewards is one of the profession's most urgent problems. Physical therapy has the evidence for preventing hospitalizations, managing chronic MSK conditions, and reducing opioid dependency. And yet, the CMS has built models around exactly those outcomes while structuring them in a way that excludes PT clinics from participating. That is a policy and advocacy problem as much as a technology one, and one the APTA is actively helping to address. And third, trust is the real implementation challenge. Whether it's ambient documentation, RTM, or predictive analytics, the tools that get used are the tools that fit into the workflow and earn a clinician's confidence over time. Adoption comes with confidence. And that should do it for yet another episode of HumanifAI HealthTech. As always, I'd like to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. And if you're joining us on Spotify or YouTube, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to leave us a rating while you're there. Once again, I'm Francesca Vereb, Head of Marketing at NetHealth, and I'll see you next time.